Good afternoon, and welcome to the first of two distinguished faculty lectures on the calendar this fall. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person, but I am grateful for the opportunity to offer a few thoughts on this very, very special occasion. As I suspect you know, we were unable to hold a lecture last year because of the pandemic. So today's lecture will honor the 2021 award winners who were recognized during the graduate commencement ceremony this past May. I was so pleased to be with you in person to personally honor each of you at our honorary degree dinner on the eve of commencement last May. I was also so very pleased to recognize you personally the following day during our commencement ceremony. Established in 1978, the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Service, Scholarship, and Teaching are presented each year to 3 faculty members who have made exceptional contributions in these areas of faculty responsibility. Honorees are then invited to address the university community at this lecture to share reflections on the award and their work at UMass Boston. Indeed, honoring the achievements of faculty members shines a light on UMass Boston's academic excellence in advancing knowledge and having impact in the world. The 2021 recipient for the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Scholarship is Professor of Physics, Christopher Fuchs. Professor Fuchs is an innovator in the field of quantum communication, quantum information, and an approach to the interpretation of quantum mechanics known as quantum Bayesianism, or QBism. Professor Fuchs has made fundamental contributions to this area of physics and attracted broad admiration, with one colleague and Nobel laureate calling him, quote, a world leader in his field, end of quote. The 2021 recipient for the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Teaching is Professor Helen Poynton of the School for the Environment. Professor Poynton has distinguished herself as an innovative and deeply committed teacher, research supervisor, and mentor to her students. She has made transformative contributions as the director of undergraduate programs in the School for the Environment and the Coastal Research for Environmental Science and Technology Research Education for our undergraduate students. Professor Poynton's investment in student success, her focus on equity in science education, and her pedagogical creativity during remote instruction made her an easy choice for this award. Finally, the 2021 recipients for the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Service are Professors Tony Meer and Keith Jones. At a fraught moment of reckoning, Professors Jones and Meer created space for community-wide dialogue on racial and social justice and public health equity. They convened the Undoing Racism Assembly, a series of conversations that provided a planning forum for strategies to address social justice and public health equity on our campus. They also facilitated Sankofa and the homegoing conversations, bringing to this work years of dedicated service on behalf of Boston's vulnerable, marginalized communities. To our honorees today, we are grateful for your passionate commitments to outstanding scholarship, teaching, and service, and we are proud to see your work recognized. I know all of us are looking forward to your presentations. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Chancellor Marcelo Suárez-Orozco wanted me to re-emphasize his apologies that he could not be here this afternoon, and that how grateful he is, though, for the achievements of our distinguished colleagues who are being recognized here today, along with the achievements of so many of our outstanding faculty here at UMass Boston. And it's particularly fitting that we come here today as part of the ongoing recognition for the colleagues who have earned these Chancellor Distinguished Awards in research, in teaching, and in service, in a lecture forum where we get to hear directly from, learn with, and benefit from the wisdom that our colleagues have been able to impart and enact in ways that benefit us all. And it's particularly fitting that we recognize this outstanding work as we come to the traditional holiday break where we pause from our busy and productive lives to give thanks for things that matter to us. And I am thankful that we are able to be here together as a community, and I'm thankful for the work and the achievements that our colleagues have made in the important areas, the three key areas that define a research university's mission, and particularly the unique mission that UMass Boston has for focusing on scholarly and research excellence, teaching and learning achievements, and service to community, local and global. Their endeavors, the achievements for which we are recognizing them, really do matter for a university like UMass Boston. It is the work of the faculty in these domains, in these realms, that drive the university forward and that help us have the types of positive impacts that we have a responsibility to engage in and to impart that goes with the privilege of working at a great university like UMass Boston. So the achievements for which we are appropriately honoring our four colleagues include groundbreaking research and scholarship, right? Contributions to our knowledge and understanding of quantum physics, particularly quantum communication and information, thanks to the work of Dr. Christopher Fuchs from the physics department in the College of Science and Mathematics. Additionally, we recognize and celebrate the masterful and innovative teaching, advising, and mentoring conducted by Dr. Helen Poynton, focusing on environmental studies, environmental science, and the opportunities for our students to become passionate about and learn about research, and particularly with an emphasis on coastal areas. And we applaud the achievements in service for the catalyzation and convening of important dialogues on anti-racism, social justice, and health promotion here on our campus and beyond. So we're thankful to Dr. Keith Jones and Dr. Tony Vandermeer from Africana Studies in CLA. The specific achievements made by each of our colleagues do advance the mission, the values, the work of UMass Boston, and we all benefit from them. I am looking forward to this opportunity, as I know all of you here are, to hear from and learn from our honored colleagues, Christopher Fuchs, Helen Poynton, Tony Vandermeer, and Keith Jones. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn the podium over first to Professor Christopher Fuchs from the physics department so that he can share with us his outstanding work in research and scholarship. Dr. Fuchs.
You know, you're never too old to learn some physics. I was sitting there during Dr. Berger's talk playing with my laser pointer. See my laser pointer up there? Isn't that great? Watch this. When I come down to the screen, nothing happens. All right, so I'm going to talk about physics just a little bit, but I thought I would start off by saying, well, you know, when I had to plan this talk last night, I thought back to an interview that I'd seen with the great singer and songwriter Paul Simon. He was asked, you know, how do you write a song? And he said, the first thing I do is I write something that is true. And once I've established something that's true, then the rest of the song comes out of it. So I thought I would tell you about something that is true and maybe not appreciated so much, is that there are only two theories of physics. You think of the enterprise of physics as a vast thing. You know, physics has given us transistors, and it's given us lasers, and it's given us GPS systems, and it's given us means for looking at faraway stars and so forth. But there's only two theories of physics. There's Einstein's general relativity, or his theory of gravity, which he found in 1915. And then there's the theory of quantum mechanics that was pretty much established in 1925. It's not just one person like Einstein's theory was. There were dozens of people who contributed to it, but in 1925, it came to a state of completion, and it hasn't been modified since. The two theories, as far as we know, apply to all matter, all energy, everything in the universe. All the rest of the things that you see in physics and all of the various courses that you take in physics are just details on that. But one thing that I think is just amazing is, despite there only being two theories of physics, and they've been stabilized for almost 100 years in the case of quantum mechanics, or over 100 years in the case of general relativity, when people tinker with the theories, they find new things in them that weren't imagined at the beginning. So it's like you're exploring a vast landscape or a jungle, and you find new things in it. One thing that was first appreciated in the 1980s was that if you could harness atoms for the purpose of computation, you could build something that's now called a quantum computer. And quantum computers could do some really fantastic things that the computers like this one that I'm talking to you from can't, just simply cannot do. You can do new things in computation that you couldn't before, and now companies are waking up, and boy, I wish I could just point at some of these for you, but I leave it to your imagination. We have companies that are now developing components that may ultimately go into quantum computers. I don't have a picture of an actual quantum computer. I have a little cartoon here of harnessing the atom for the purpose of computation, because the truth is there are no quantum computers yet. It's just a big research area. Let me give you just some small hint of the sorts of things that you could do with a quantum computer. Here, I'm going to give you a test. Everybody pull out a piece of paper. I've got two numbers there, two big numbers, and they're both prime numbers. And so if you've pulled out your piece of paper, start multiplying the two together. You should be able to do this. I don't know how long it would take somebody with pencil and paper, but I'm surely you can do it within a couple of days, maybe a week, something like that. If you work hard and you're always careful to carry your digits to the top. So you can do this, or if you open up your laptop and you have it equipped with Mathematica, then you just type these numbers in. I have a student out here, a PhD student, who can type faster than anyone in the secretary pool anywhere. And he could just type these in, and Mathematica would give you the answer like that. And here's the answer. It's a 129-digit number. Fine. That's not so interesting. That's something you can do on this computer if it were equipped with Mathematica. So the answer is this 129-digit number. But what if I gave you the 129-digit number as a question? And I told you that the 129-digit number is the product of two prime numbers. can you find them? We could go to Jeff Dusenberry, who runs the supercomputer center here, and let him load up a program on the supercomputers, and he would not be able to find the two numbers that multiplied together to give this one. He wouldn't be able to do it with a month of computation or probably even a year of computation. It would take worldwide resources to be able to break this number into its two components. And if I were to give you a 1,000-digit number, not a 129-digit number, no computer, not all of the computing power in the world could find the two factors within the age of the universe. So this is something that you just cannot do on a classical computer. But guess what? You've already been conditioned for it. On a quantum computer, you could, even for a 1,000-digit number. So this is something that was appreciated about quantum mechanics, not in 1925, but only started to be understood by the mid-90s. The idea, though, came about from a paper by Richard Feynman in 1981, where he really had his mind or his eyes set on something else. The something else, he says, is, might I say immediately that we always have had, secret, close the doors, we always have had a great deal of difficulty in understanding the worldview that quantum mechanics represents. Okay, I still get nervous with it. Can I learn anything about this worldview from asking this question about computers? Could you solve something with a quantum computer that you couldn't otherwise? So he was thinking, quantum mechanics is weird. Can this help me understand what quantum mechanics is about? The weirdness of quantum mechanics, really, we can put it all in one symbol, one magical-looking symbol. This is something physicists use in all of their calculations in quantum mechanics. You don't need to know what it is. It's a kind of mandala. It's just something, you sit with your legs crossed and you hum and look at it. Well, it's caused no end to the confusion about what quantum theory is about. So Feynman said, he's like, I still have my doubts. Secret, you shouldn't admit this as a physicist. He wouldn't say that about Einstein's theory, but he would say it about quantum mechanics. And the key thing that is causing the trouble is we do all of our calculations with symbols like this, but if we try to point to something in the world and say, that symbol means that, we have trouble figuring out what it is, and that causes a great amount of discomfort for people. So much so that students, are generally told to kind of stop thinking about it. Here's a great quote by Steven Weinberg. A year or so ago, while another physics professor and I were waiting for an elevator, our conversation turned to a young theorist who had been quite promising as a graduate student and who had then dropped out of sight. I asked Phil, what had interfered with the ex-student's research? Phil shook his head sadly and said he tried to understand quantum mechanics. So indeed, students are told to stay away from these problems and in fact just shut up and calculate. And you can buy that t-shirt by some vendor on the internet. Shut up and calculate or you won't get a job. Well, in my far youth, I got an idea about how to take some of the mystery out of quantum mechanics, and my PhD advisor and a collaborator and I wrote a paper titled Quantum Probabilities as Bayesian Probabilities. So we went beyond the realm of shut up and calculate. And the key idea was this symbol that I showed you a little earlier, that one, is such a troublemaking symbol. If we understood it in terms of Bayesian probabilities, if we put an X through that symbol and replaced it with a different kind of concept, the Bayesian notion of probability, then maybe we can get a better point of view about quantum mechanics and start to understand it, take away some of its mystery, and in fact find that we can use the theory for more stuff. Bayesian concept of probability. The Bayesian concept of probability is that probabilities are not things that are out there in the world, but rather they're just gambling attitudes. So when I go to a horse race, I say, how much money am I going to put on this horse? Well, that is determined by the probability that I have for whether it'll win or not. Are my probabilities right or wrong? No, they're not in this Bayesian conception. So here's what's strange and what is scary. The usual notion, so look at the X, the usual notion of what physics is about something that's out there. And this new conception of quantum mechanics says, no, the calculus isn't about what is out there, but the calculus is about what's going on in here. David Merman put it in an article in Nature in 2014 as QBism puts the scientist back in science. Well, you can imagine the trouble working on things like this might cause. I had a promising start to my career. I was first at the California Institute of Technology. I had one of their prized postdoctoral fellows. After 2 years, I started applying for faculty positions, and I didn't get a single bite. Well, I'd never taught, so that hurt me greatly. I had never been a TA, so that, I think, kept me out of the small schools. I did get a couple of interviews at places like MIT, but I didn't get an offer. Well, I didn't get an offer because, well, I wasn't famous enough to be at MIT. So I was sort of stuck in another world. So promising start, California Institute of Technology, going to get a faculty position, didn't happen. So I went to Los Alamos National Laboratory as a postdoc, and with a child in tow now. And, well, it was just a postdoc. While I'm at Los Alamos, I'll work for faculty positions. Didn't happen. Well, then I went to Bell Laboratories. I was still a researcher and very happy in life. I hear that Maxime Molchani said something like, I'm happy with my existence. I was happy with my existence, but you know what? I went to Bell Labs, great famous physics place, and the tech crunch came, and all the rats jumped ship. So I ran off with my family to Dublin. By the way, if you look at this photo, you see somebody, this poor soul out in the desert, holding his child. Well, I was carrying my family to all these places. We moved to Dublin for a year and a half. We came back to Bell Labs. Then we ended up at Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics. Now 2 children. All the while I was applying for faculty positions. All the while I got no bites whatsoever. I was working on quantum foundations, something you don't do. Lesson for all of my students who are up in this front row. You're working on quantum foundations. It's probably something you shouldn't do. So, move after move after move. In desperation, I decided to give up on academia and go to a defense contractor here in Cambridge. And I thought I can do it. I can do it for the family because it'll keep the family in one spot, and that's all important. So we moved to Cambridge, Mass, or Stoneham, Mass, actually. And I went to the defense contractor and learned that I just hated my life. Absolutely hated my life. But I was stuck because I decided I'm just not moving again. UMass Boston advertised a junior faculty position. And I thought, well, I had applied for plenty of junior faculty positions. And every time I would apply, people would say things like, you're too senior for this position. You're too senior for this position. I thought, well, I'll do it one last time. So I applied to UMass Boston for a junior faculty position. And the hero of the story is Dr. Bala Sundaram, who's now a vice provost or an associate. I don't even know what you are. I don't see you much anymore. But I got a note from him. It says, Dear Dr. Fuchs, I'm delighted to communicate that the search committee was very impressed with your application and that you have been selected as one of the finalists for the open rank position. We would like to invite you. The advertisement was for an assistant professorship. When I got a reply from Bala, it was open rank. I came, and finally somebody wanted me. It was a wonderful feeling. Well, we haven't done so bad here. I dug up my funding this morning. So since 2015, I arrived in January. We've gotten, for this program of mine about reinterpreting quantum mechanics, and only for that, $2.75 million from the John Templeton Foundation across the years. Fetzer Memorial Trust, $383,000, National Science Foundation, $400,000, and so forth. So we haven't done bad monetarily. UMass Boston risked everything by hiring me. I had never taught a classroom in my life, and they hired me, made me a full professor, and tenured me within 10 days or so of my arriving here. And we've had some wonderful groups here. So this was my research group pre-pandemic. Here. Oh, I can't read the microphone. Well, the woman on the far left is Gabriela Barreto Lemos. She was postdoc here and is now a professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Right below her, two young people, Kyler's and Abi Kanal. They were undergrads in the Honors College. Abi is now a grad student in Sweden. The man at the bottom with his legs, who's leaning back, was postdoc, Blake Stacy. He was instrumental in getting we just recently got $400,000 from the NSF. I just showed that on the last slide. Blake was instrumental in that proposal. The man standing up and looking goofy, pointing at the board, is Jacques Pinard. He was instrumental in getting the $2.45 million that we just got from the John Templeton Foundation. The fellow with the bun up at the top right no longer has a bun. Was first a postdoc at Tufts University, and then now he is the prized postdoctoral fellow at a place called CQUIC, Center for Quantum Information and Control in Albuquerque. And the dog's name is Q, and it's spelled by the letter Q. Can anyone guess his middle name? Bism. QBism Fuchs. So that was the old group. Here's the new group. A lot of them are out here. There's Ghislaine top left to right, Ghislaine Coulter-DeWitt. She is a master's student. She already got a master's at Perimeter Institute, and she came back here to get another master's before going off to Europe. The next man is Matt Weiss. He is a PhD student in the computational sciences program, and he runs circles around me. Then we have Jacques Pinard again. Well, now he's getting paid by that Templeton grant. Mary Fries, a local artist and also a master's student. Blake Stacy again at the bottom left. Sachin Gupta is next. And then skipping to the right, the honorary QBist, that's young Professor Olga Gulko, and her student David Yamas. You see what he really looks like here, the guy with the glasses. And the dog, his name is Archibald. Why Archibald? Well, he is named after one of my heroes in physics, John Archibald Wheeler, who said about this funny stuff in quantum mechanics, behind it all is surely an idea so simple, so beautiful that when we grasp it in a decade, a century, or a millennium, we will all say to each other, how could it have been otherwise? Well, my students are working on this. They're trying to find a new formalism for quantum mechanics that purely consists of Bayesian probabilities. And luckily, QBism is a project, so it gives them plenty to do. And I'm just grateful to UMass Boston for giving me the opportunity to get these bright minds working on things that I can't do myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And now it's my pleasure to bring up Dr. Helen Poynton, our honoree for outstanding teaching.
Right, thank Thank you so much. I was really honored to receive the Distinguished Teaching Award, but I feel like this award really should be shared with so many of my colleagues through the CIT program, through workshops on remote teaching, and so many other innovative teachers here at UMass Boston who have given me creative ideas to try in my classroom and with my students. So I think that there shouldn't just be one teaching award, but there should be like a celebration for all of the excellent educators here. And I'd also like to acknowledge many colleagues that through conversations and sharing readings with me have shaped the ideas that I'm going to talk about here. And finally, to my husband, who is always challenging me to think what equality is, rethink what equality is. So science has had a long legacy of racism and sexism, and we've struggled to free our fields from these patriarchal, white, supremacist practices. One such practice is the idea of an expert up here lecturing to all of the empty minds out in the halls. And so if I had an hour instead of just 15 minutes, I would disrupt that practice, and I would put all of you guys into groups and give you questions and case studies to try to answer. Unfortunately, I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to give some questions and invite you to think deeply about them. Okay, so my first one here. So please consider, it's the very first day of your STEM 101 course. And at most universities across the country, this is considered a weed-out course. And it's used to distinguish the serious students from those that aren't smart enough to make it and should be dropping out of the major. So how do you introduce your class to your students? Do you say, look around this classroom. By the end of the semester, only 1 out of 3 of you are going to remain. The rest of you will have dropped or will be failing. Or do you introduce it as, look around this classroom. We are a learning community. If we lose one student to this material, we lose a community member. Let's all work together to learn this material together. How would each of these introductions be perceived by a woman, by a student of color, or a student who's working full-time? All right, my next case study is of a student who just returned from being absent for 2 weeks. They never contacted you during these 2 weeks, and when they finally returned back to class, they tell you this story about how their younger brother got sick and they had to take care of them. And then they got sick, and they wanted to contact you, but really the priority of the moment was taking care of their brother and themselves. So what do you do about that missed exam? Do you tell them they're going to receive a 0 on the exam and good luck with making up for the rest of the semester? I mean, we can't coddle our students. Will you consider giving the student a makeup exam if they can provide a doctor's note? But consider how the health system is biased against people of color and women, and it's likely your student didn't turn to a doctor because they just don't trust them. Or do you allow the student to take a makeup exam and encourage them to attend your office hours and even offer extra hours for them so they can make up the material? Now think back to fall of 2020. Oh, God, I know. None of us want to do that. But what if the sickness was COVID? Right? Would your response have been different? We were all told to offer our students extra flexibility during that time. And I heard lovely stories from my colleagues about empathy. Some of my colleagues even had like check-in times at the beginning of all of their classes where students could unload some of the stress that they were experiencing. So let's try to bring that empathy that we shared in fall of 2020 to all of our semesters. My final case study for you to consider is that you are the chair of your program, And several students have come to you because they're having trouble fitting this 4-hour-long lab classes into their schedules because of home or work obligations. And you also know that racism and sexism produce unequal distributions of these obligations for students of color, especially in the context of capitalism. So what do you do? Do you decide to waive all of these classes for the students? Do you tell the students they have to make a choice between their education or these other obligations? Or do you change the curriculum to meet their needs? During COVID, my 300-level marine pollution lab course had to go remote. I decided to offer the course with a series of do-it-yourself or DIY lab exercises, and we got permission to bring the students onto campus twice to do in-person labs. At the conclusion of the semester, I surveyed all the students to determine the effectiveness of the course, and to my surprise, the DIY labs were ranked as more effective in helping students to understand course objectives compared to the in-person labs. Students remarked, what worked very well was the ability to work at our own pace. I think it was helpful given more time to figure out how to do the labs on our own. I realized that the online labs could be as effective, if not more effective, than in-person labs, and also provide increased accessibility for students who are disadvantaged by racism and patriarchy. An additional benefit of the online DIY lab classes is that many of the students were able to invite their family members to join with them in these lab exercises, and that's shown here in this photo, which I received permission from one of my students to share with you. 40% of the students in the class actually involved a sibling or a parent or a child even in one of the lab exercises. So it provided an opportunity to bring science home, which might be an important for exposing younger siblings to science or provide science outreach to an older generation. So I have now made this online lab part of my regular course offerings. By using welcoming and encouraging language, empathy, and making our classes more accessible, we can begin to create an anti-racist learning environment beyond COVID. But despite all of these things we can do, our pace towards equality is slow. As shown by these statistics by the Pew Research Center, where the percentage of advanced degrees for people of color has only incrementally increased over the decades. Meanwhile, funding agencies have invested billions of dollars in diversity STEM programs, but we've barely moved the needle on diversity. Why? Trying to solve racism in STEM education as a single educator, or even as a myriad of like-minded educators, is like trying to solve climate change by lowering our individual carbon footprints. Racism, like climate change, is a systemic issue, and therefore we need systemic change to address the problem in all its manifestations. Most science see the lack of diversity in STEM as a problem, but in addressing this, are we paternalistically forcing persons of color to conform to this culture of science under capitalism? Or are we trying to change science? So let's look at the culture of science under capitalism. How is it viewed for a student of color? Well, I can only talk about my experience. And when I was a graduate student, I was exposed to competition for funding, to be the first one to get that paper out, exploitation, long hours. There's this patriarchal model of the expert lecturing all class-wide and controlling what questions we were even able to ask. I was told to have a thick skin so I could deal with the criticisms and to get over, the peer review process, even when those comments were sexist. And for a student of color, microaggressions and racism, such that students must constantly prove themselves over and over again? Is this an inviting environment for an aspiring student of color? It's also important to ask who benefits from science. Where are the highest paying jobs in STEM outside of academia? Within the military and defense contractors? Pharmaceutical companies? Agribusiness? Who benefits from this science? In what ways might science be contributing to and reinforcing the oppression of people of color? As Vacuole and Ayers argue in their 2019 article, The Racial Politics of STEM Education in the US, without rigorous assessment of the fundamental political ways science can be deployed towards unjust and harmful ends, we are left with an incomplete at best, and at worst, a dishonest representation of what science is. This is disheartening, especially for those of us who love science and love discovery. But as the authors of The Scientist in the Crib have taught us, babies and young children learn through experimentation. And as Rachel Carson, who is shown here in this image, has taught us, we are all born with a sense of wonder. It's not science that's the problem. The problem is capitalism and its profit motives that shape science. So let's reimagine science. How can we change science culture? What would it look like to have a welcoming, intersectional STEM program? What would our spaces look like? What science would be prioritized, and who should it benefit? I invite you to provide your visions, your imaginations of what a welcoming and anti-racist science would look like at the end of our talks today. I provided a poster board over there, and there's sticky notes and markers, and I'm really excited to have all of you guys join in this conversation. And as you do, consider the remarks of Vacuole and Ayers. That BIPOC communities have continuously innovated against the tight constraints of racial, class, and gender oppression. New visions for STEM learning as a practice of freedom and justice demands attention to these bone-deep, historically and culturally mediated forms of ingenuity. We should be looking to BIPOC communities and not the science establishment to help us reimagine science. We just elected Massachusetts' first queer and woman governor and passed the Fair Share Act, which provides millions of dollars of new funding into education. We need to take advantage of this unique moment to demand changes, and we can start here at UMass Boston. UMass Boston is the third most diverse college in the US, and this is something we are deeply proud of. Given this, our struggle for racial equality is so important. But even within the UMass system, we are confronted by overt racism, such that the most diverse campus in the system receives the least amount of funding per student. As shown here in the graph, the bars represent funding per student, while the line represents the percentage of students of color within the student body. UMass Amherst, the least diverse of the 4 campuses, receives about 50% more funding per student than students at UMass Boston. We must demand an end to this racist inequality of funding across the UMass campuses. And second, we need to stop treating graduate school like it's purgatory. Recent news features in Nature and Science articulated how graduate students, which average 5 to 6 years for degree completion in STEM fields, live in poverty. We cannot expect students to endure this with promises of future academic appointments or lucrative jobs which might not even materialize. Now, if you look at this histogram here at the third most diverse college in the US, where 40% of our graduate students are students of color, we are in the second percentile for graduate student stipends in the Northeast. So I ask you, is this racism? And our students cannot survive, as shown by the messages our students wrote to our administration during a protest last week. We must demand better, and we can do that now in this moment. But know for sure that no one is just going to give these things to us. It will take a multiracial class struggle and collective direct action, and it will look something like shut down STEM. This was a nationwide strike against racism in STEM that involved thousands of researchers across the country, entire STEM departments at schools like MIT, and organizations like AAAS. And it looks something like this: a united effort of 48,000 students and postdocs across all of the campuses of University of California system, all going on strike. And if you support these movements, and you agree with me in collective direct action to end racism and exploitive practices in STEM, I invite you to contribute to their hardship fund. This directly funds the students for their loss of wages while they're on strike. And that will allow them to continue to strike. And it will allow them to continue to inspire us to do the hard work necessary to create anti-racist STEM education. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Helen. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Keith and Tony, our distinguished honorees for outstanding service.
First, I want to thank Helen for her remarks and her reflection, as well as Chris. And I was here thinking that I wish we could work together, because there's so many things I do in my class that I think we could learn from each other. But I think that what we really need is we need leadership on this campus that could put these ideas in practice in a real way. So first, I want to begin by saying greetings and good afternoon to Chancellor Suárez-Orozco, who's not here, Provost Berger, award committee members, faculty, staff, students, friends, and family, and members of the community. Additionally, we want to thank and acknowledge many colleagues across the campus without whose commitment to this work we would not have been in front of you today. I also want to give special greetings to Dr. Wande Abimbola Awishi Agbaye, who is the former chancellor of University of Ile-Ife from Nigeria. We want to begin by saying that we are very honored to have received the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Service and are grateful to have been asked to participate in this 11th annual lecture. In addition to sharing this with you today, the ideas and values that we have driven our work, we think it vitally important for the well-being of the campus to also share with you our truths. Unfortunately for us, the feeling that accompanies being honored is in sharp distinction to a feeling of the administrative betrayal and hypocrisy. Instead of feeling the broad institutional support necessary for our work to become infused through our campus culture, we have lived the past year and a half in administrative isolation and deep anxiety. Instead of feeling truly honored and included, we have experienced marginalization and administrative retribution. Such feelings, such experiences are in clear contradiction to being distinguished and run counter to an administration that once upon a time has also seemed committed to the process of becoming health promoting. Standing before all of you at this very moment on the occasion of this public address, we feel it is incumbent upon us to speak honestly and concretely to the actual practice of the work we engaged in and not take a ceremonial bow following the accolades the administration has bestowed upon us. While with one hand, we have been awarded as faculty with distinction, with the other hand, we have been publicly flogged by the administration who have smeared us and the Africana Studies Department with labels of unwelcoming and hostile. Indeed, at the same time they flog and smear us, the administration makes public pronouncements regarding their investment in the Africana Studies Department. The truth, however, is that the administration has divested in the department for the past 5 years. Such pronouncements are more about managing a public relations crisis than respecting and honoring departmental leadership. The administration instead seems more focused on silencing the voice, ideas, and leadership of the Africana Studies and generally investing in it. Therefore, as the campus community, we must confront the proverbial elephant in the room. We must confront the way in which UMass Boston, as an educational institution, remains entrenched in ongoing colonial legacies of structural racism. We, the Africana Studies Department, and other colleagues across campus have long provided leadership on initiatives seeking to unlearn and undo the harms caused by centuries of structural racism. But our work during the past few years emerged out of a different historical context, one of extreme clarity regarding the dangers imperiling all of us within a global system violently committed to profit and return rather than the health and well-being of people, their communities, the ways of life beyond exploitation and extraction. Our work was thus guided from the outset by Frantz Fanon's injunction that each generation must discover its mission, fulfill, or betray it. It was with this spirit that we sought, in collaboration with others across the campus, to influence the administration broadly and the chancellor in particular to commit to the process of becoming an anti-racist and health-promoting public research institution at a time of extraordinary historical crisis. But what has happened to this vision? Has it been, in Fanon's words, fulfilled or betrayed? To answer this, we must ask, what was the actual process we urged the university to engage in to genuinely position itself nationally and globally as one of the leaders of advancing an anti-racist and health-promoting vision at a time of rising authoritarianism, resurgent white nationalism, and increasingly devastating climate catastrophes? We must also ask, how genuine has their commitment been to advancing this vision, and in what ways are they providing the necessary leadership to help move us forward? It is important to note that besides today's public lecture and last May's commencement, we have never in over a year been offered a meeting with the administration to discuss implementing the very vision for which we have been named distinguished faculty. In this so-called post-pandemic, post-George Floyd moment, what indeed has the administration learned from our campus-wide efforts to engage in a transformative shift of our campus culture? In the fall semester of the pandemic, we organized, coordinated, and produced a 4-part series of Sankofa Conversation series on structural racism that included the chancellor, the past and current provosts, several vice chancellors, vice provosts, deans, union leaders, tenure and non-tenure track faculty, staff, as well as undergraduate students, elected officials, and international community members. These virtual conversations drew, on an average, approximately 200 participants per session. Throughout these conversations, we sought both to uplift those historically silenced, as well as to center diverse voices from across campus. The result was a powerful series of inclusive conversations, unprecedented at this university for their truth-telling. These conversations repeatedly pointed to the need of campus leadership to move beyond performative gesture. In nearly every panel, those assembled pointed to the urgency of supporting necessary structural interventions that would move UMass Boston forward in a way that would repair past harm. Students, faculty, staff, even administrators voiced support for putting in place new curricular interventions, anti-racist campus-wide training, and effective equity mechanisms for ensuring the promotion, retention, and recruitment of all faculty and staff. In the spring semester of 2021, we followed the four-part Sankofa conversation on structural racism with a six-session restorative justice colloquium, which took Yaa Gyasi's powerful historical novel, Homegoing, as a basis for a campus-wide collective inquiry into the European colonial origins of anti-Black racism. In this moment of so-called racial reckoning, we sought to engage the entire campus community in dialogue and self-reflection around the deeper and still ongoing colonial histories which continues to structure and mar our contemporary world. These panels included scholars, graduate and undergraduate students, activists, and community organizers, as well as artists, poets, musicians, and dancers. Each session of the colloquium was composed of two parts, the first half of which was a rich and rigorous panel discussion on the novel and its relation to our historical moment, and the second half was composed of small group discussions facilitated by graduate and undergraduate students whom we met with separately and mentored. Not only was this an effective at genuinely engaging with what Saidiya Hartman calls the afterlife of slavery. It was also an innovative, interdisciplinary, pedagogical approach that we hope would be a model for beginning the work of shifting campus culture. Unfortunately, while the colloquium was profoundly transformative for those who participated, the administrative support for this program did not materialize in all the ways carrying it forward would have required. Beyond giving us an award for this work, the administration has not helped the Africana Studies Department to institutionalize this kind of campus-wide programming, which we see as crucial to the process of becoming an anti-racist, health-promoting public research institution, and not merely in name, but in actual fact. Beyond these educational institutions, beyond these educational initiatives we were engaged in, we were also working in concert with other units across campus to create what we call the Undoing Racism Assembly, organized around our colleague Cuff Ferguson's theory of the spokes model. We assembled various networks across campus, including the Faculty Staff Union, the Professional Staff Union, the Clerical Staff Union, the General Student Organization, and other core issues pertaining to curricular interventions and anti-racist training and equity for all faculty and staff. This organizing helped spark other initiatives, such as the Faculty Staff Union's successful bargaining of an unprecedented $50,000 drawn from the faculty's own research and educational support fund to support racial justice initiatives for both tenure and non-tenure track faculty. These efforts to organize across campus was fundamentally driven by a series of earlier efforts within the Africana Studies Department to produce a restorative justice framework. This framework, which was a response to the pandemic, came to be reflected in the Academic Continuity Task Force, chaired by then Dean Berger. Out of this task force emerged a 10-year, $10 million proposal entitled the Restorative Justice Initiative, which we placed on the Chancellor's desk August 14, 2020. To date, committee members involved in the proposals co-authoring were never offered a meeting with the Chancellor or the Provost to discuss its findings and recommendations. Wow. One of the recommendations that emerged out of this report was the establishment of a Restorative Justice Commission to help oversee the implementation of the initiative's proposals and hold the administration accountable to such commitments. While adopting the recommendation, the Chancellor did so without consulting with those of us involved in conceiving of the Restorative Justice Commission as a mechanism for advancing the proposals the initiative put forth. Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Dr. Vandermeer. It's an honor to be here today. It's wonderful to see you all. But let us return for a moment to the early days of the pandemic and the global upheaval it caused. Let us remember how it demanded we think differently, how it revealed to us on a global scale how intimately our lives were implicated in one another's. Writing in these early days, the great Indian novelist Arundhati Roy prophetically suggested that we must approach the pandemic as a portal, seeing it, in her words, as a gateway between one world and the next. Concerned about the impact of the pandemic on the welfare of our students and their families, we co-wrote an open letter to students during this period entitled "The Urgency of Now: Navigating Our Time Together in a Moment of Profound Global Uncertainty." The open letter sought to reach out to students and meet them where they were, in their hurt, in their fear, in their confusion. It was sensitive to the ways in which the pandemic would only further intensify their vulnerabilities not only to the virus, but to the general disposability they experience given this nation's violent histories of racial, socioeconomic, cisgendered, and heteropatriarchal injustices. At the outset of the pandemic, and with increasing urgency in the uprisings that followed George Floyd's murder, we, as non-tenure track faculty in the Africana Studies Department, felt the necessity to address ongoing structural violence and injustice not only in the broader society, but within our very own institution as well. From the very beginning, we and our colleagues in the Africana Studies Department have repeatedly shown a commitment to working in the spirit of shared governance and partnership with the university's administration. Throughout the last few years, we have consistently engaged the administration in constructive dialogue regarding a pathway for addressing anti-Blackness and white supremacy on our campus. We remain steadfast in our commitment to finding solutions and engaging in honest, open, and sometimes difficult dialogue, doing precisely what Bettina Love recently instructed us all to do if we seek transformational change: call them out to call them in. Indeed, all of our efforts have been offered in the spirit of love for our students, the broader campus community, for our staff, and for our faculty colleagues across the university. Through relational practice, we have sought to hold spaces that allow us as a campus community to engage in collective acts of what Robin D.G. Kelly calls freedom dreaming. For us, freedom dreaming means working as abolitionists to free ourselves, our communities, and the world itself from the brutality and harm of white settler colonial logics and practices. In this sense, we understand our efforts to be aligned with what Bettina Love calls the practice of abolitionist teaching. Indeed, here we are on the verge of entering another year, 2023, and we are still tragically failing to erase the color line that Du Bois so powerfully articulated in 1903. So what is to be done? Where do we go from here? To have the administration commit to the process of becoming an anti-racist and health-promoting public research institution was the most critical aspect of our efforts. But to achieve this, we believe the administration would have to agree to engage in and not avoid difficult conversations on campus regarding shared governance. Furthermore, the mere visibility or presence of Black, brown, LGBTQI+, women, and other people of color within the administration does not ensure they will be empowered to bring forth the urgent transformational change our campus culture needs in terms of gender and racial equity. Our service to this campus was motivated by a principled interest in co-creating opportunities for sincere and honest conversations that would help guide the university away from rhetorical and performative gestures and genuinely toward new practices that reimagined what a university might be and what work it must do in a time of profound danger. UMass Boston must go beyond what scholar Frank Tuitt, a recent candidate for the dean of the School of Education powerfully calls plantation politics. Tuitt et al. Remind us of the challenges we face when they ask, what role does the university play in the fight for equity and against racism if we understand how closely related to the plantation system it remains? The service we engaged in demanded more from the administration than seizing new branding opportunities, creating a new slogan, changing the letterhead and logo, passing out ice cream and t-shirts, hiring special assistants to the chancellor or provost, or conducting yet another racial climate survey. The administration's appropriation of restorative justice should not be confused with what Miriam Kaba calls transformative justice, especially in light of various calls by the FSU, the PSU, the CSU, the GSO, Africana Studies, the CIFER, CIT, the Undoing Racism Assembly, the Restorative Justice Initiative, and others to hold the administration accountable for its commitment to the process of becoming an anti-racist and health-promoting public research university. What we need at this critical moment is an engaged administrative leadership willing to sit down and listen to the various realities different strata of faculty, staff, and students experience on campus. The COVID pandemic, racial uprisings, the reversal of a woman's right to bodily autonomy, the banning of critical race theory, the possible indictment of a former president, not only for tax evasion, but for inciting an insurrection at the nation's capital, the proliferation of misinformation, increasing floods, droughts, and hurricanes. These combine to create newly complicated and worrisome conditions for the times. The cost of living in Boston, along with increased gentrification, has made it unlivable for many of our students as well as for faculty and staff. Can I get an amen? Yeah? Ashe. The pay and promotion inequities for many faculty, particularly non-tenure track faculty and staff whose labor is extracted, exploited, and under-recognized, has produced palpable tensions across campus. Where is the administrative leadership for these times that is capable of enacting a unifying vision of justice and equity that can move the campus community forward together? Given the impasse we are at as an institution, it seems fitting that our students have revised the university's recent slogan, calling out in order to call in justice for the times. Justice for the times would require that the university acknowledge, value, respect, and support the contributions to knowledge production that comes out of the Africana Studies Department. Justice for the times would require the administration to deal equitably with the graduate student union and the clerical staff union. Justice for the times would require the administration to repair the harm done to the Africana Studies Department and its members when it canceled 2 searches last spring for what are still incoherent justifications. Justice for the times would require the administration to honor the sovereignty and self-determination of the Africana Studies Department to conduct its own faculty searches. Justice for the times would require the administration to adopt a strategic plan that actually aligned with the once stated goals of becoming an anti-racist and health-promoting public research institution. And justice for the times would require the administration to hold honest and transparent conversations with faculty and staff regarding the campus reorganization plan, which seems to be in flagrant violation of the principles of shared governance. Our colleague Cedric Woods, during one of the Sankofa conversation panels, declared that budgets are moral documents. We must collectively ask the administration whether their budgets reflect their commitment to justice for the times. Commenting upon the value and importance of Africana studies and critical ethnic studies at this historical moment, the scholar Lorja Garcia Peña asks, Why do we still need to convince our institutions that this knowledge is essential? That our students matter, that our work has value. Toni Morrison once wrote, "The destiny of the 21st century will be shaped by the possibility or collapse of a shareable world." We believe, and our work attests to the belief, that Africana studies and critical ethnic studies is a knowledge project that must be expanded across and infused within and throughout the everyday culture and practice of this institution. The work we began needs to be supported, expanded, and institutionalized if we are to co-create and freedom dream together and build a shareable world and truly make manifest justice for the times.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Keith. This has been a moment to celebrate our four colleagues for the distinguished work they have done in scholarship, in teaching, and service. Part of what we've heard here, right, that while we recognize the specific works that they have done in each of these areas, that it's also true that research, teaching, and service are scholarly activities aligned to the mission of the university that come together in a myriad of ways. So we've benefited from learning about how our colleagues provide leadership to bring the person back into science, to understand the challenges of racism in the larger system of STEM, and the role that we can play in changing that and addressing it, and the importance of being able to speak our truths about how best, among many ways, to address challenges that are both local, national, and global. And it's important that we look at the fact that we have strong leaders, talent, expertise that care about these issues deeply in various different academic units at various levels throughout this campus. And so I appreciate all of you being here. I applaud our four honorees, Dr. Keith Jones, Dr. Tony Vandermeer, Dr. Helen Poynton, Dr. Christopher Fuchs. And I challenge us all to think about what are the ways that we can continue to build on a myriad of different ways to approach these issues that matter very deeply to us all. And with that, I invite you all to join us in a reception, which I believe is back over here, to further celebrate and honor our four distinguished colleagues. Thank you so much.